The Empire thought 700,000 soldiers was enough to crush Tempest. Their commander, Caligulio, looked at our labyrinth and saw only a treasure chest waiting to be plundered. But he didn't realize. Once you step inside, the only way out is through the true dragon Veldora. And my guardians? They're already arguing over who gets to annihilate the invaders first. If you're enjoying our journey, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep the AI narration, subtitles, art, and rendering moving. And if you'd like early access to upcoming episodes while helping cover production, check out the Patreon link below. The bait is taken. Let's see what the Empire's elite forces can do against a living hell. The Empire had clearly taken the bait. An operator reported that the enemy was fanning out in front of the main gate. On the big screen, we could see row after row of Imperial soldiers lining up with strict, orderly discipline. Argos was showing it to us, and Zoe's people were monitoring the area too, so this was not an illusion or a trick of magic. All 700,000 of them were there. They had abandoned stealth and gathered in one place, maybe to intimidate us. Not that intimidation would work by now. We had no intention of surrendering. Running away to fight another day was still on the table if we had to, but capitulation was not. And honestly, for us, this was close to ideal. I muttered, "We have won."
Yes, we have.
Benimaru answered without hesitation. Factually speaking, he was right. Once the enemy was inside the labyrinth, Tempest itself would take no damage. As long as we fought patiently, the advantage was overwhelming. Unless the Empire had brought some unimaginable champion capable of defeating a demon lord, the battlefield would belong to us. I said, "Good thing those greedy bastards let the labyrinth catch them."
Very true. I thought Sir Rimuru's bait was a little obvious, but I am glad they accepted it for us.
I turned toward Gadora. "Looks like you did a good job on it." The enemy was revealing its full extent. If they had scattered deep into the forest, we might have had to worry about dangerous individuals hiding all over the place. Spreading your forces too thin is usually a bad plan, but in this case, having them all together helped us enormously. The only question now was how much of the army they would keep on the surface. I said, either way, it would not make strategic sense for the Empire to ignore our nation. If they blockade the gate and keep marching west, that becomes trouble. If they left even 100,000 outside, that would be enough to surround the entrance. The rest could move toward the western nations without much fear of being attacked from behind. We would still be able to transport ourselves in and out of the labyrinth, but only to places where we had a real connection, places we had spent enough time in before. And we could not teleport into any area sealed with space-freezing barriers. Practically speaking, if we could undo the seal on the entrance to the dwelling of the spirits, Ramiris' old home, we could use that. But if the Empire sealed the surface and attacked the west, we would still be stuck watching them overrun the nations there. If it came to that, we would have to force our way out and attack. So in the end, this might turn into a ground war anyway. Before that happened, we wanted to cut down their strength as much as possible. Veldora asked whether we should warn their ground forces.
Perhaps we could agitate them into deploying more soldiers inside.
Ramiris agreed that there was something to be said for that, but I shook my head. "No warning," I said.
No? Why not?
I asked Ramiris, "You remember the words we put on the gate, right?" "Oh? Right, there was that!" We had carved a message into the massive gate. Through these gates, the weak are unworthy to pass. So how would they react?
I kinda wanna see what they do when they read it.
If it were me, I would snap and come storming through the gate, although I would still keep my troops at bay.
I was sure Benimaru would do exactly that. Trap or not, he would ram his way in.
I would pay it no mind. I am all-powerful.
I kept that thought to myself. Yeah, sure, Veldora. I did not ask you.
Me? I do not know. If Beretta insisted on going, then I guess I would follow along. That kind of thing.
As for Ramiris, if she would be too scared to go through, then she should not press her luck. And name-dropping Beretta like that was only making him snicker. Diablo's smile sharpened as he spoke.
If anyone is foolish enough to ignore that warning, they forfeit their right to Sir Rimuru's mercy. They have no right to complain about what happens.
I did not know why he sounded so gleeful about it, but Diablo was correct. The message did carry the nuance of a warning.
Of course, if they are too cowardly to go through the gate, then they have no right to be on this battlefield in the first place. We must annihilate them all and make them understand the folly of antagonizing Sir Rimuru.
I winced at Shion's logic. If she put it that way, then we were all going to have to fight them ourselves, weren't we? Could she maybe think a little before offering advice? Geld was already cracking up. The rest of my main staff were of similar minds, super motivated, all of them, and eager to dedicate more victories to me. Testarossa and Ultima had donated a huge number of souls already. Whether everybody knew that or not, they seemed ready to follow the pair's example. Demons apparently enjoy the residual emotions left inside souls. Testarossa told me she especially loves faces frozen in fear. That smile of hers really is scary. Before I reincarnated, I probably would have been petrified. By now, well, that was just how things were. That was fine for demons, maybe, but what about the other monsters? It was not like they would know what to do with the souls they collected. I had only learned the details a few moments ago myself, and I was still wondering why this had turned into a competition. Maybe it was like spoils of war for them, but I did not need those kinds of spoils. 700,000 though. If we really scored all those souls, I could awaken 7 more people. The fact that thoughts like that naturally came to mind now was frightening. No. I had to stay firm with myself. I could not let my mind turn monster on me. With that resolve, I faced the big screen again. They are moving, someone reported. Rows of Imperial soldiers were advancing in formation, calmly storming the gate as if they had no fear at all. I muttered, just as planned. If at least half of them go in, things will be easier later. Benimaru smiled.
I have no intention of letting even a single soldier escape. I will go in too, if need be.
My second corps has approximately 17,000 troops. Compare us by numbers, and it looks dire. But in ability, we do not miss a beat. We can use the terrain to entrap the enemy.
Great to hear. And if I burn the inner halls with my flames, anyone left standing ought to be strong enough to put up a worthy challenge.
Geld added that Carrera would be glad to help with that since she had been wanting to let off steam for a while. Benimaru agreed there was no doubting the power of a primal. It was a tough act to follow. This conversation was going very differently from what I expected. Benimaru and Geld spoke as if victory was already settled, and Carrera had become part of their strategy as a matter of course. There was not even a shred of hesitation about using a primal's power.
That is not fair, Benimaru. If we are aiming to wipe out our foes, that is where I come in.
Even Shion was stepping up. Once again, she had forgotten that she was supposed to be my bodyguard. Still, there was no safer place for me than the control center. Team Reborn, the force Shion led, prided itself on relentless tenacity. If this turned into a ground melee, leaving them idle would be a waste. I could see myself giving Shion deployment orders if she wanted them, but not yet. I told her, calm down. We need an accurate gauge of what the enemy is doing first. Depending on how things go, I may need your abilities. She had to be content with that for now. Diablo gave a low, delighted chuckle before speaking.
If Sir Rimuru needs a bodyguard, I alone can more than fit the bill.
If Diablo was volunteering for that, then if things really got hairy, we could call Testarossa and Ultima back. They could teleport in no time flat. Benimaru accepted the idea and turned to Shion.
If Sir Rimuru says so, then fine. In that case, you will be up, Shion.
Right, you can count on me, Benimaru.
Shion beamed as she thanked him. I had trouble understanding why she loved fighting so much, but if she was happy, then great.
Good. In that case, Rimuru, it is time to prepare.
I will join you, Master! Time for us to show them just how terrifying the Labyrinth can be.
Quite so. And with me as your final defense, you have absolutely nothing to worry about.
Beretta excused himself with Veldora and Ramiris, and the three of them left the control center brimming with enthusiasm. The room suddenly felt a lot quieter. For Veldora, this would be his first real day of work as master of the Labyrinth. I was not entirely sure whether he would have a role to play, but either way, his zeal was encouraging. I said, right, let us see what the enemy has in store for us. I tried to sound as Demon Lord-like as possible while I watched the rows of people marching through the gate. Everyone else nodded. And with that, our battle against the 700,000-strong main army of the Empire began. Caligulio, commander of the armored division, smiled as everything went according to plan. One after another, his elite rows streamed through the massive gate. It connected to the labyrinth, no doubt, and that labyrinth was certain to bring him immense wealth. By now, he assumed the monsters must be panicking over the six-figure force at their doorstep. But this was all thanks to careful planning and soldiers strong enough to execute it. After lengthy discussion with the Empire's main brass, they had chosen their invasion route. The Magitank division would go first and stand out as much as possible. Alongside them, 100 airships from the Flying Combat Corps would be deployed as an ace in the hole, ready to fight off the evil dragon Veldora if he appeared. The rest of the Flying Combat Corps would transport Gradim's magical beast division westward over the sea. Since that path was expected to be safe, Caligulio only had to provide logistical support, operating 300 airships at full capacity to move military supplies along with Gradim's force. They had concentrated their forces mainly for the projected battle against Veldora. The 100 airships sent to the Forest of Jura each carried the Empire's most elite magicians. With that final piece in place, Caligulio believed their support system was complete. The West would fall. If Gradim attacked Anglecia from the north, the war would end quickly. It was a simultaneous dual-pronged operation, and Caligulio's armored division would play the starring role. Success would give him dazzling military results and far more power inside the Empire. The thought made it impossible for him to stop smiling. The outline was simple. The Magitank division would make a conspicuous entrance, the enemy would seize on them, and then Caligulio would lead the main force in a grand display of power against the Demon Lord Rimuru's stronghold. According to intel, the Demon Lord could apparently transport his entire capital into the labyrinth for safekeeping. It sounded ridiculous, but it was true. All that remained on the surface was a large gate opening into the labyrinth. The first task then was to surround it and block any escape route. With magic cancelers working on the surrounding space, they could prevent teleportation and seal the area completely. The one problem was Dwargon. One underestimated heroic King Gazel at their own peril, and the dwarves had remained undefeated for a millennium for good reason. But Caligulio dismissed the thought. In his mind, there was no way they could lose. What could old-fashioned antiques do against 2,000 Magitanks? It would not even be a fight. Dwargon's neutrality did not register as a serious concern. The Empire had left the armed nation alone because it would be an inconvenience. But if they could win now, there was no reason to hold back. Magic and science had produced an all-powerful new system of combat. That was the armored division. Gazel might be a champion among dwarves, but Caligulio could not imagine one man turning the tide against tank guns. Swords and magic were anachronisms to him. The dwarves, trapped by outdated armaments, could never understand the true value of this next-generation army until it was too late. These ideas were wrong at the core, but Caligulio had no way of knowing that. He was so assured of victory that defeat never entered his mind. Moments earlier, the long-awaited report had arrived. An envoy from the enemy had visited. Negotiations had failed and hostilities were already underway. Caligulio and his team had followed the plan, marched forward, and now captured the land believed to be the Demon Lord Rimuru's stronghold. Perfectly at ease, he contemplated his troops. He thought it was a waste to give Gaster a free shot at Gazel's head, but soldiers needed a carrot now and then. Lieutenant General Gaster and Major General Faraga were among his most capable subordinates. Caligulio had no doubt they would meet expectations. Both Gaster and Faraga were dead by then, but expecting Caligulio to know that would have been asking too much. Caligulio asked one of his men, "Have we heard from Gaster yet?" The man reported that there had been nothing since Gaster entered battle. Caligulio frowned. The dust should have settled by now. Lazy of him to delay his report. He cannot be having trouble over there. The soldier had nothing else to add. Fine, Caligulio said. What about Faraga? Gaster's first field battle in ages must have gone to his head, Caligulio reasoned. Total victory was in sight, so perhaps he was too focused on the fight. Faraga, though, should have had a perfect view from the skies. The liaison officer assigned to Faraga was sweating heavily as he struggled to make contact. Caligulio's mood cooled. What is he doing? The harried liaison reported, Major General Faraga encountered a monster believed to be Veldora. He said he would send a follow-up once he confirmed it, but nothing had come after that. Just the first report, and then total silence. The communications wizard on duty explained that the forest of Jura was so dense with Magicules that voice transmissions could easily be jammed. That explanation made sense to Caligulio. The forest had been created by his archenemy Veldora, and now it housed a demon lord. Deciding there was no use worrying, Caligulio pushed the concern out of his mind. If Gaster and Faraga were engaged in combat, they would not waste time on reports. If Veldora himself was on the field, no calls would make it out anyway, so Caligulio switched gears. He said, "We will wait for the good news. If they really encountered Veldora, silence is natural. No point shuffling our feet over them. We have a labyrinth to capture." Given the size of the force he had given Gaster, Caligulio did not spend a moment imagining defeat. In fact, the lack of contact could even be good. If Faraga was fighting Veldora above the forest, that meant only the Demon Lord was inside the labyrinth. Rimuru's so-called Big Four were said to be threats, but the restructured armor core would make quick work of them. Without further hesitation, Caligulio turned his eyes to the labyrinth. Before him lay a clearing large enough to hold a city. In the middle stood the huge entrance gate. Magic-based probing revealed no traps or threats. It was simply waiting for his force to challenge it. The words carved into it read, "Through these gates, the weak are unworthy to pass." To Caligulio, that proved his strategy was correct. He imagined the monsters hiding everything because they were afraid he would plunder it all. Cheeky, shallow creatures. Looting under the name of supply procurement was something every nation feared. Feeding a force as large as the Empire's was no small matter, and taking the enemy's supplies was always effective. Caligulio laughed at what he considered the monster's shallow intelligence. His soldiers had been enhanced through surgery powered by magic and otherworldly science. They could work at full strength without ordinary food or water for a week. One nutritionally balanced energy bar provided enough sustenance for a full day of activity, and each soldier carried 20. Potable water could be conjured by magic. The bars were portable, light, and easy to calculate. They solved the worst part of marching with an army this large: logistics. Every soldier had received a fresh supply before the operation, and there was no need to plunder enemy grain or water just to keep moving. So there were no supply problems. By their calculations, the elite soldiers could operate inside the labyrinth for up to 27 days. If the enemy hoped that a vast army would starve in isolation, they were about to learn how naive that was. Caligulio thought, "Think you have won because you cut off our supplies? Think again, fools." His mocking laugh caught the attention of a noble staff officer, a man eager to cling to Caligulio's coattails. The officer laughed too and said, "My good Caligulio, do not be so mean to them. Demon Lord Rimuru began this campaign by making a mistake. He misjudged our restructured armor core so badly that he sent out his greatest asset, the evil Veldora, and now he is surrounded by champions." Caligulio replied, "I cannot blame him for that move. Bait or not, it is a very large force." The officer agreed that Rimuru would naturally send out his maximum war power. Egged on by the chatter, Caligulio scoffed. "Call him a demon lord if you like, but I think it is clear how out of his league he is. I am sure he is curled up somewhere in the labyrinth, shivering from head to toe." The officer laughed again. "You are absolutely right. Now all we have to do is drag this demon lord out and have Commander Caligulio chop off his head. Then he will become a demon lord-slaying hero." The nobleman never wasted a chance to flatter his superior, and Caligulio did not mind. The first step was to seize the labyrinth and use it as a foothold. Establishing a base here would help maintain momentum as the Empire overran the West. If they waited too long, Gradium and the Magical Beast Division might conquer and pillage the West from the north first, and Caligulio wanted to be out of the Forest of Jura before then. But there was no need to panic. Defeating Veldora the Storm Dragon had been the Empire's long-held desire. If they achieved that and took Rimuru's head as well, Caligulio would become the greatest achiever of the entire war. His staff were just as confident. With 700,000 soldiers, none of them could imagine defeat. Caligulio said, "We can make this area our camp once we build a barrier around it. then they can start marching in. The labyrinth will never know what hit it. His men accepted the order, and no one objected. Gradim could have glory in the west if he wanted it. For now, the real prize was the money and goods inside the labyrinth. Greed had won the day. The plan was simple. Overload the labyrinth with numbers and strip it bare. Their confidence had stopped them from hiding their desires. Whatever share of the labyrinth's bounty they received would make them fabulously rich. And so their conquest began. The poor, oblivious soldiers joyfully descended a staircase they would never climb back up again. The labyrinth never refuses anyone who comes for it. That applies even if the invading party does not respect the rules. But the safety was already off on this loaded gun. What waited beyond was the labyrinth as it truly was, a living hell beyond anything they had ever experienced. In one of the deepest rooms of the labyrinth, there exists a secret conference room not even I know about. Gathered there were the rulers of the maze, people who usually did not come together very often. The fact that they were all present showed how vital they considered the topic. The meeting was chaired by Beretta, Ramiris' aide, representative, gopher, and general manager of Labyrinth Affairs. Seated at the 4 cardinal directions were the 4 arch-dragon lords, fire, frost, wind, and earth. At the center was a round ebony table where the 10 dungeon marvels had gathered. There was 9-head Kumara, guardian of floor 90. There was Insect Kaiser Zegian, guardian of floor 80. There was Insect Queen Apito, boss of floor 79. There was Immortal King Adalman, guardian of floor 70, and Alberto, the Death Paladin who served as Adalman's advance guard. They were joined by 3 others. Gadora, the old sharp-eyed wizard, sat beside Adalman. Meanwhile, Bovix and Equix, co-guardians of floor 50, huddled in one lonely corner, painfully aware of how much they stood out among these titans. The 2 of them had once believed they could defeat any opponent who came their way. Now, seeing the pinnacle of the labyrinth around them, they understood exactly how large the difference was. That made them squirm, but it was not the only reason they were cowering. Everyone in the chamber had a bad habit of squabbling over who was strongest. They were doing it now, weighing down the very atmosphere. Gadora, despite being new, was actively joining the debate, which only made Bovix and Equix realize all the more clearly where they stood. Beretta and the Dragon Lords did not join the competition, but they had no motivation to stop it. If that was what the others enjoyed, then fine. That indifference only encouraged the rivalry. Adalman's recent promotion, granted after direct praise from Rimuru, was still fresh in everyone's mind. It had lit a new fire under every guardian present. The deeper floor marvels did not get many chances to show off during normal dungeon operations, so any opportunity to prove themselves was seized with enthusiasm. Gadora wanted to be useful to his old friend Adalman and secure a place for himself. Adalman wanted to work even harder for his beloved Rimuru and earn higher floors. Alberto followed his master but quietly carried ambition of his own. Apito and Kumara had a strained relationship, to put it mildly. Kumara guarded floor 90 and almost never got a chance to perform in public. Apito had once faced the Paladins, and Kumara was intensely jealous of that. Apito, for her part, was competitive enough to refuse to back down from her rival over anything. Zegian acted above the fray. Realistically speaking, he stood at the pinnacle of the labyrinth, the target of everyone's envy. Whether he asked for it or not, he was constantly dragged into the debate. To sum it up, things were acrimonious among the most powerful denizens of the labyrinth. But did they truly hate each other? No, their goal was to prove they alone were the best, not to kick each other down. There was jealousy, yes, but respect too. They were diligent rivals, nothing more. Despite the crowd, the hall was surprisingly quiet now. Every eye rested on the main seats at the table, still unoccupied. They belonged to Veldora, king of the labyrinth, and Ramiris, its creator. They had been called to the meeting 2 hours earlier. The marvels had carried on noisily for a while, but once Beretta appeared, they quieted down. Beretta took his chair and told everyone that Veldora and Ramiris would arrive soon. Kumara asked, "Chairman, may I ask a question? Why have we gathered here today?" Beretta answered, "For the reason you are all imagining, I presume. We must discuss how to dispatch the foolish army attempting to invade the labyrinth." Everyone fell silent. They had all guessed the reason already. Whatever jockeying had gone on before, Hostility toward the enemy replaced their competitive spirit now. What did it mean to make an enemy of the Labyrinth? They were of one heart on that question. They needed to make the Empire understand. A heavy tension filled the hall. Then Ramiris and Veldora appeared.
Hey, sorry for the wait!
How nice of you all to gather here.
Their arrival raised the fervor in the hall. Ramiris, delighted by that reaction, addressed the crowd in an unusually serious tone.
Today we are facing an unprecedented crisis, the kind we have not seen since the Labyrinth was founded. So I want to hear your thoughts, people.
That was the signal. Kumara could barely wait and said that the answer was obvious, but Apito beat her to it. Apito said, "We killed them all." The two glared at each other. Kumara asked if Apito would leave something for her level this time, since Apito had already played with the Paladins for so long. Apito shot back that Lady Hinata was one thing, but the Crusaders had been so weak she had experienced one of the most boring fights of her life. A different kind of tension ran through the hall. Oddly enough, Veldora stepped up to defuse it.
Stop fighting, you two, and worry not. This time, I will give all of you a chance to wage battle. From what I have heard, they think the deepest level of the dungeon is merely 4. Can you believe it?
No, everyone thought. Veldora nodded.
I thought it would be fun to play along with those expectations, but really it seems like too much trouble.
Yes, exactly. Like my master said, it is too much trouble to wait for them to get past floor 50. Not just for us, but for our foes too.
There are currently 700,000 soldiers jamming the area around the gate. Rimuru instructed me to lure as many of them as possible into the labyrinth.
But making such a huge crowd navigate that entryway is going to take forever. Honestly, why did they bring so many people? So instead of waiting, we decided to divide the enemy up. 1,000 soldiers per floor and repeat as necessary.
Luckily for Ramiris, the Imperial soldiers were marching in neat, disciplined rows. Their entry had been smooth so far, but it would clearly take a long time. If the first few rows started fighting, the entire flow would stop, and then nobody knew how long it would take to cram everyone in.
How does that sound? If you get a lucky draw, you might even face a real strong opponent or two.
Who knows? One of them might be the grave threat to Rimuru that Benimaru has been searching for. I think Benimaru worries far too much about that. But if you can find the man, it will be a feather in your cap.
Ramiris and Veldora made every eye in the room sparkle. To the Guardians, the Big Four who served Rimuru were objects of intense admiration. Benimaru in particular was Rimuru's closest friend and most trusted confidant. Everyone wanted a chance to fight him someday. Veldora might have insisted that he was Rimuru's stoutest ally if anyone had mentioned Benimaru's name, but nobody did, so things continued smoothly. Apito asked if that meant they all had a chance. Kumara said that if so, she had no complaints. The two patched things up immediately, and they were not alone. Everyone was driven by similar ambition now. Adalman asked whether they could do whatever they pleased with anyone who entered their territory.
Exactly.
Now everyone treated the matter seriously.
They are still filing in right now, but I am going to connect them straight to floor 41 for starters. Once 1,000 make it in, I will move on to the next floor down, so be patient. Bovix and Equix, I have another job for you two, so I will brief you later.
Jealous glances shot toward the pair at once, making Bovix and Equix tremble. They huddled even closer, trying to survive the social pressure. Both agreed it would be far easier to fight the invaders than face this room. Ramiris paid them no mind.
The idea is to spread these troops out and take them in at each floor. 100,000 people from floors 41 to 50. 100,000 from floors 51 to 60. 100,000 from floors 61 to 70. 100,000 from floors 71 to 80. 100,000 from floors 81 to 90. Then maybe each Dragon Lord can tackle 10,000 at once. If any more come in after that, I can stash them in the higher floors too.
That meant the Labyrinth could house a maximum target of 540,000 invaders at once. Ramiris wanted at least 350,000 if possible. Then came the most important part.
The one thing I do not want you to forget is that these are one-time rule changes to the Labyrinth. Each Dragon Lord chamber has been expanded to 10 times its normal size, and I switched the floors around too. If they make it past floor 90, they will plunge right into those dragon rooms. But that is not the important part. The important part is that I changed the conditions for beating the Labyrinth.
Ramiris did a little dance in the air to emphasize her point. The condition was simple. Once someone passed through the main gate on the surface, they could not go back out until they beat the Labyrinth. Beating it was defined as defeating Veldora, which meant the Empire would need to deploy nearly everything it had for even a chance. And to gain the opportunity to face Veldora, invaders would need 10 keys, each held by one of the 10 dungeon marvels. If a group started on floor 80, they would still need to backtrack and defeat the earlier marvels. The moment the marvels heard this, they perked up. Even the Dragon Lords behind the table rumbled approval. One Guardian said that gave them all an equal chance. Another called it a race to see how many enemies they could hunt down. Several were already out for blood. Alberto quietly hoped he would find someone worthy enough to draw his sword against. Adelman warned him not to be cocky. Their only thought should be laying waste to their divine enemies. Master and servant were brimming with spirit. Others meditated silently on the coming battle. In their own way, everyone in the chamber was in high spirits. Beretta, as overseer of the marvels more or less, finally spoke. Beretta asked Ramiris about the matter he had requested assistance with.
Right. Rimuru gave it the go-ahead, so let us see how things unfold with it.
Beretta thanked her, then stood and surveyed the 10 dungeon marvels. He announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, Lady Ramiris assigned me the title of Dungeon Master. I would normally share this title alongside my duties as chairperson of the 10 dungeon marvels, but I would like to give my position to whoever puts in the best performance in this battle." For Beretta, the overseer job had always felt like a pile of dead-end work. Ramiris liked the sound of having 10 marvels better than 9, so he had been tossed in to fill the ranks. The duties changed from day to day as one would expect from Ramiris's bird-brained management style. Sometimes the work was little more than being Ramiris's gopher, and to put it bluntly, that was not Beretta's cup of tea. Trainee held a similar position but seemed far more valued by Ramiris, mostly because Trainee did not lecture her about anything. Beretta could not see what was fair about that. Trainee also did whatever she pleased, vanishing on mysterious trips whenever she felt like it, even if she did technically get Ramiris's permission first. Beretta had grumbled over the whole arrangement in secret for a long time. He was still one of the 10 dungeon marvels whether he liked it or not, but he had been looking for a chance to hand the position to someone else. Now, conveniently, that chance had appeared. The marvels had to resist the urge to cheer. Even Bovix and Equix, filled with ambitions not quite matching their talents, hoping against hope that they could join the 10 marvels. Unfortunately, their hopes were shattered by Beretta's next words. He continued, "For this battle, I will provisionally grant Sir Gadora my position in the 10 dungeon marvels. Given Adalman's testimony about his powers, and given his own knowledge, both Lady Ramiris and I have no qualms about this appointment." Gadora was surprised but calm. He had lived long enough to adjust to sudden opportunities. Inside, though, he was thrilled. This was his time to shine. If he made an eye-catching effort, he would not remain provisional for long. Gadora had always been aggressive. He had to be, or he never would have mastered the right place at the right time knack that let him navigate the world for so many years. His sharp eyes also told him exactly how powerful the 10 marvels were. Some were beneath or equal to him. Others were so far above him that comparison was ridiculous. He knew he would never become overseer if he tried to leap past those titans immediately. His goal was membership first. Gadora said, "I humbly accept your offer." Beretta thanked him with genuine relief, and the two shared a practical "you scratch my back, I will scratch yours" moment. Temporary or not, the lineup had changed. Beretta was out of the 10 dungeon marvels and Gadora was in.
Oh yes! I am just as glad you are taking the offer, Gadora. I will assign you to floor 60 with the Demon Colossus boss. Make good use of that one.
Everything wrapped up without a hitch. The matter had already been discussed with Rimuru, and the plan was to put Gadora to the test. Gadora had been helping with Ramiris's research anyway, so he needed little convincing. To him, being entrusted with the Demon Lord's Demon Colossus was a dream.
Great! In that case, should we give Gadora a nickname too?
Any ideas, Gadora?
asked out of nowhere, Gadora had nothing ready. The Empire was already invading Labyrinth space. They really needed to take defensive positions as soon as possible. Surely everyone was thinking that, even if no one said it. But the big bosses did not seem concerned and treated this like another chat. Gadora was impressed despite himself. Emperor Ludora was a great man too, but Gadora feared he was no match for this group. Given the labyrinth they were in and the storm dragon beside them, perhaps that was only to be expected. Gadora had never been one for loyalty, but seeing Veldora and Ramiris, and most of all seeing how adeptly Rimuru manipulated those two, he could not help but feel awe. Gadora suggested, "How about Rune Master?"
Ooh, how catchy.
Yes, is it not? When push comes to shove, I always have the right answer.
There was no possible way Gadora could object. It seemed everyone had their orders, but Ramiris still had one more thing to announce.
Oh, right. I had a very important role for Bovix and Equix.
The two almost jumped out of their chairs. Bovix nervously asked what the role was. Equix asked what Ramiris wanted them to do. Ramiris answered matter-of-factly.
I am going to have you two stand by on floor 30. You can use the bosses there however you like, so if you see any invaders trying to escape, wipe them out for me. I set the resurrection point for your bracelets at floor 32, so even if you get killed somehow, no worries. Do your best up there.
By the sound of it, Ramiris assumed this would be easy work. Bovix and Equix could only nod. They were motivated, but more than that, they were anxious. If they failed here, they feared being abandoned for good. A half-hearted effort could cost them this prestigious position. The boss of floor 30 was an ogre lord, ranked B+, with 5 minions. Under orders from A-ranked Bovix and Equix, they should make a solid team. Gadora had accepted a place among the 10 dungeon marvels despite being new. Bovix and Equix had been part of the labyrinth far longer. They could not afford embarrassment now. They also realized something else. Even if part of the Imperial force made it past floor 30, there was still no escape. Even if they climbed back to floor 1, they would only have to turn around. In that sense, their assignment was low stakes. Unfortunately, losing to the soldiers would still mean getting killed again and again, which was not pleasant. Bovix rallied himself. We are guardians too. If we earn recognition for our exploits, we are bound to get a promotion. Equix agreed. No need to take turns or hold back this time. Let us crush our enemies with everything we have. The two promised Ramiris that they would crush every fleeing Imperial soldier they found and live up to her expectations. Their backs were against the wall, so the only way forward was through. Their anxiety vanished, replaced by enthusiasm. Now everybody had an assigned role.
Rimuru asked us to lure as many Imperials into this labyrinth as possible. If we want to do that, you need to show these people a good time, at least to some extent. Got it?
Everyone nodded. For day 1, they would keep quiet and watch how the enemy moved. Then Ramiris, satisfied, dropped one more bomb.
Good. Well, good luck, everyone. And by the way, Rimuru said he will be watching this battle. We will decide the next overseer based on this, but it is a good chance for all of you to show off.
Everyone's faces turned dead serious. Zegian, silent until now, gravely asked, Sir Rimuru will be watching? That surprised Apido. Zegian rarely spoke at all. Apart from his loyalty to Rimuru, the Insect Kaiser cared little for anything besides strength.
Yes. Rimuru said he would observe the whole thing.
The unexpected pressure made Ramiris stammer. Not even she saw Zegian speak very often. Veldora followed up for her.
Zegion, there are no lies in Ramiris's words. Rimuru has great curiosity about the strength of his labyrinthine ranks. That is why he trusted you all enough to give you such a major role in this war.
Veldora saw Zegian as an excellent student, one he had trained in combat for some time. Zegian was stronger than even Cheris, who had been with Veldora for ages. Under the right conditions, he could fight evenly with Veldora himself, or perhaps better. In essence, he was too strong. Nobody in the labyrinth except Veldora could handle him. That was why this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity excited him so much. Zegian said, Sir Rimuru, watching us. This is so emotional for me. I will show him how much I have grown.
course! He said he expects a lot from all of you, so let us give him a big surprise.
Ramiris smiled innocently, but deep down she was merciless. As a self-styled demon lord, she had no fear of survival of the fittest. Everyone who enters the labyrinth, including Imperial soldiers, is presented with a set of rules. After each person is confirmed as a willing participant, the question is sent directly to their instincts. Are they willing to never leave unless they beat the dungeon? Would they hear that as a threat or a warning? Even if some of them thought they were in trouble, none turned back. They filed into the labyrinth like ants to sugar, dreaming of fortune and glory. At that moment, Ramiris ran out of mercy. Without reservation, she welcomed all of them as enemies. Soon, the soldiers of the Empire would discover the true nature of this labyrinth, the fear it caused. Zegian left his seat and said, "Let us dedicate this victory to Sir Rimuru." With that signal, everyone began to move. Visitors would soon arrive at the hellscape, and the Guardians had to wait for them. Column by orderly column, the soldiers of the Imperial army marched down into the dungeon. Their movements were methodical and stripped of anything fancy. Each soldier wore a safety belt around the waist, connected front and back so each column stayed about 10 feet apart. Alongside the tied columns were separate combat teams, unbound and able to move freely. When not engaged in battle, those teams held on to the main force's lifelines. With enough sheer quantity, no labyrinth should have been a problem. The Empire had prepared in advance, and this force was not supposed to get lost. Satisfied with his handiwork, Caligulio's mind turned toward the riches he expected to gain. To him, the maze itself was child's play. The real issue was the monsters living inside. Not their strength exactly, but the time required to deal with them. Preliminary intelligence claimed the labyrinth ran 60 floors. Some rumors suggested the true number was 100, but the other officers dismissed that as an unrealistic bluff. Still, the deeper the floor, the more valuable the treasure would be, especially the purer magic crystals. That alone made the labyrinth attractive. The deeper floors were also likely to contain stronger monsters, and that could be a hassle. Caligulio stroked the beard he was so proud of and reached his conclusion. Once they learned what kinds of monsters lived below, they could decide how to subdue them efficiently. Looking at his well-trained soldiers, symbols of the Empire's authority, he saw no real threat. Their training had simulated the battle expected inside. Spirit magic practitioners would map the route, special ops teams would disarm traps, combat teams would dispatch monsters, cleanup teams would scavenge materials and magic crystals. The lead soldier of each column oversaw the process from beginning to end. Once treasure was gathered, the soldiers tied together would pass it rearward all the way to the entrance gate. Platoons stationed there would carry it to Command HQ. This chain would also handle unexpected changes. If trouble appeared, the soldiers were trained to retreat at once and report. Caligulio's plan worked extremely well at first. Then, after approximately 1,000 soldiers passed through the gate, all contact suddenly vanished. One of his men asked what they should do. What happened to the soldiers was unclear. Judging by the surgically clean cut on the rope, however, someone must have been interfering with spatial links. Caligulio remembered the briefing. The labyrinth could change its structure, but only once every 24 hours at most. That troubled him, but he did not stop the brigade. For a while longer, he allowed the invasion to continue. Further observation revealed that the labyrinth changed structure with every 1,000 people sent inside. No, not quite. Caligulio said, "I see. It looks like the enemy is welcoming us with open arms." His staff officer did not understand, so Caligulio explained, "It is simple. It does not suit them to have the labyrinth crawling with people. The stairs we see there probably do not lead to the second basement floor. They likely lead to some other floor instead." The officer asked whether they could really do that. Caligulio gave him a look and a snorted chuckle. "Of course they can. This is a demon lord we are fighting. If they could not manage that much on their own home turf, they would have been destroyed ages ago." So far, his prediction seemed accurate. From the soldier chatter before contact was lost, there had been no sign of anything unusual. It did not seem reasonable to think something had simply happened to them out of nowhere. Caligulio asked, "Besides, we lost contact exactly when 1,000 people entered. What do you make of that?" The staff officer called it insightful. Caligulio nodded and considered the next step. Even in the early stages, they had already retrieved bits of treasure, finely made accessories, weapons and armor made of Magisteel, and magic crystals of very high quality. If they halted now, the fate of the 2,000 soldiers already inside would be sealed. Better to stick to the original plan and keep pushing masses of people in. That was Caligulio's decision. He said, "They are trying to threaten us, trying to make us give up on conquering the Labyrinth so Rimuru can buy more time. No doubt he is expecting reinforcements from Dwargon." One officer agreed that by now those reinforcements must be occupied elsewhere. Caligulio said, "Exactly. Stopping now is what the enemy wants. Make sure everyone understands that." The order came back promptly. Continue the primary objective to conquer. Caligulio was satisfied. The enemy had tried to trap him and he believed he had seen through it. Weighing the potential profits against the lives of his soldiers, he ignored the uncertainties lingering in his mind. That moment decided the Imperial army's fate. A day passed after the invasion began. The march continued day and night. By then, 350,000 soldiers were inside the labyrinth. Like clockwork, every 1,000 soldiers were being sent somewhere different. Some groups could still send at least part of their cargo back outside the spatial rift, and the kinds of treasure they carried out kept changing. Almost none was low quality. Some weapons even had strange concave holes inserted into them, perhaps some new enemy weapon. To Caligulio, that was proof of the enemy's panic. If the monsters had time, surely they would have recovered such weapons themselves. Leaving them behind proved events had hurried them. He told himself the labyrinth had all but put out a welcome mat, and now that pressure had arrived, the enemy was in trouble. Using the labyrinth to attract people from surrounding nations was clever, maybe, but failing at this crucial moment made the entire thing seem shoddy. Even so, after a day, Caligulio decided to halt the onrush and observe. The soldiers near HQ took breaks and shifts. They could have continued, but unease had begun to creep in. He asked, 350,000 troops are inside, correct? His officer answered that half the army had invaded the labyrinth. Caligulio was losing contact every 1,000 troops, but his predictions still seemed right. Not long after, a report arrived that soldiers inside had made contact with the ones who went in first. That gave the Empire momentum. Everyone had been hiding anxiety over the missing troops because getting worked up over every hitch would be embarrassing. But knowing their comrades were safe energized the whole command. Half the army had now been sucked into the dungeon. But the problem slipped out of Caligulio. We have put hundreds of thousands in there and they still have not fully plumbed the labyrinth? A staff officer admitted that even he had not expected it to be this vast. He frowned over the number. 60 floors. I thought each floor shrank the deeper you went. The officer replied that this was what they had heard. Surely the troops would reach the lowest depths before long. The plan had called for the Imperial army to conquer the labyrinth already, but things had not gone that way. Worse, once they stopped sending new soldiers inside, they effectively lost contact with everyone already in the labyrinth. The treasure caravan halted as well. Another worry followed. And not one person who went inside has come out yet? His subordinate answered nervously that no one had. Apparently the labyrinth had to be fully beaten before anyone could leave. Caligulio had heard about that. Everyone who went in had a question run through their heads after all. The subordinate continued. The conditions were clear enough, but before they could slay the king of the labyrinth, they had to defeat guardians who defended 10 keys. Caligulio asked if they had not beaten those guardians yet. They had an answer, but not the one he wanted. The king of the labyrinth was likely Rimuru. If killing him beat the labyrinth, that was exactly what the Empire wanted, or should have wanted. Instead, all they had done by halting the invasion was cut contact with everyone inside. The question behind all of it finally came out. Do you think a force of 350,000 can defeat the Demon Lord? The staff were at a loss, but only briefly. One officer argued that Farmus had blundered because it ran into Veldora. If it was only Rimuru, they had enough resources. Another agreed, citing the many over A-ranked troops in the initiative. His officers loudly rejoiced over their assured victory, relieved to be on the same page. Caligulio, however, could not shake off his unease. He ordered a liaison team sent inside to try every communication method available. They accepted the order and went through the Imperial protocols. Nothing worked. Magical calls, telepathy, every method failed to produce a response. By then, the staff officers were having trouble kidding themselves. Their hearts, once bursting with visions of loot, had sunk into gloom. Without contact from the inside, they had no way to understand the battle situation and could not properly perform their jobs. One officer proposed resuming the invasion after reorganizing the ground troops. Caligulio nodded. No matter how this turned out, they needed someone to check the situation. Keeping everyone on the surface meant they could learn nothing about what was happening below. The large gate remained wide open. It showed no sign of closing and had not changed since first discovery. Yet the moment people stopped filing through it, nothing at all could be sensed beyond the archway. Even the steady flow of goods from inside had cut off. Partly because of that, Command HQ was becoming an uncomfortable place. 2 more days passed. Caligulio demanded to know why they were receiving no further reports. An officer suggested that, with every 1,000 people taken to a different place, it might be difficult for the troops to find comrades deep in the labyrinth. Caligulio snapped. "Are you telling me the labyrinth is that vast?" Another officer faltered. "You do not think." Caligulio pressed him. The officer began to ask whether they had all been defeated. Caligulio cut him off. "Shut up, fool. You have lost your nerve." Someone tried to calm the room. He argued that this was Rimuru's plan all along. Make them suspicious, make them paranoid, and force them to give up on the labyrinth. Unlike the first day, only 1,000 troops were now allowed to enter each hour out of caution. At that rate, it was hard to retrieve new information, let alone treasure. The first day had seen 350,000 soldiers march in. The second day added 150,000. The third allowed only 30,000 more. That left 170,000 Imperial soldiers on the ground. An officer asked whether it would be wiser to conserve their numbers. Caligulio admitted he hated playing into the enemy's strategy, but cutting their forces any further might be unwise. Another officer suggested waiting perhaps 20 days. Supply teams had entered the labyrinth, so the troops' operational time should be extended. Someone called that passive. The cautious officer answered that they still had no contact with Lieutenant General Gaster or Major General Faraga either. They might be in intense combat, or perhaps something worse had happened. Several intelligence units had gone down as well. None had returned. Trusted friends and dedicated Imperial soldiers were now completely out of touch. Caligulio insisted the Magicule count was too high. What other reason could there be? He was assertive about that much, because he did not want morale to fall any further. But the atmosphere around HQ was already unsettled. An eerie silence hung over the scene, and every person there had begun to foster ominous premonitions. Even their commander felt the same. He still had 170,000 soldiers here. Turn that around, though, and there were only 170,000 left. Caligulio thought, "Perhaps I am making a terrible mistake." Now the doubts came clear as day into Caligulio's mind. The towering gate before him seemed incredibly creepy, feeding his anxiety. As for the fate of everyone who had crossed it into the labyrinth, Caligulio would learn that soon enough.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.